Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Fireside Chat, usually hosted by the General Grand Master himself, but his travel has prevented that. So I am here, and I would love to introduce everyone to most puissant companion, Richard Eppler of Connecticut, who is here to talk to us today about the history of the cryptic rite. And he has given us a lot of information before. If you haven't seen it, all of the previous copies of the Cryptic Freemason are available on our website. And without further ado, I will turn it over to most puissant companion Richard.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me, because in this presentation, I'm going to try and explain the interesting and sometimes unique steps that led to the formation of the cryptic rite, consisting of the degrees of Royal Master, Select Master, and Super Excellent Master. While some of these degrees have elements that came from Europe, they were revised and assembled into the Council of Royal and Select Masters, a York Rite body, during the first and second decades of the 19th century in the United States of America. It is truly an American rite. We call this the cryptic rite because both the Royal Master and the Select Master are concerned with a subterranean crypt or vault where treasure or valuable secrets are preserved so that they can be found, sometimes centuries later. Legends about a crypt underneath the Temple Mount are very old. One legend, told by Philostratus, who was born about 365 AD, describes a horizontal crypt consisting of a large cavern reached by a narrow passage. This legend was expanded and modified in the cryptic degrees into a horizontal crypt erected by King Solomon during the construction of the first temple. Now, before I begin to discuss the origins of the individual degrees, there is one caveat you need to keep in mind when we consider the activities of our forebears. The regulations and laws governing Masonic procedure and practice, with which we're now familiar, were first formulated in response to the Morgan affair in the 1840s and 1850s. Prior to that time, things were much more informal, and hence some of the activities which I will describe would sound strange to us today, but they were perfectly proper at the time they occurred. So let's now concern ourselves with the consideration of the degrees that which now make up the cryptic rite. I'm going to begin with the Royal Master degree, which came out of nowhere on September the 2nd, 1810, when a man named Thomas Lowndes, who lived from 1762 to 1825, and 15 other of his friends, active Masons, founded what they called, quote, the Columbian Grand Council of Royal Masters, unquote. At this meeting is recorded the first known conferral of the Royal Master degree. Now, it's not known where or how Tom Lowndes acquired the Royal Master degree. On the one hand, he did receive several degrees of the Rite of Perfection in 1806 from Abraham Jacobs, a Grand Inspector of the Emperors of the East and West, which could have included the Royal Master degree or a related degree, although there is no evidence whatsoever of it. Other scholars, and I happen to be one of them, are of the opinion that Thomas Lowndes created the degree a few years before 1810. At the very least, he is recognized as the principal disseminator of that degree. At that first meeting on September the 2nd, 1810, the members elected their first officers, including Thomas Lowndes as the, quote, thrice illustrious Grand Royal Master, unquote, an office he continued to hold until 1821. The degree of Royal Master remained the working degree of this council from its founding until it joined the formation of the Grand Council of Royal and Select Masters of New York in 1823. However, shortly before the founding of the council, or shortly after the council, it added 3 additional degrees, one of which survives today. On December 22nd, 1817, is recorded the first conferral of the degree of Super Excellent Master, presided over by Thomas Lowndes. The degree was probably written by him and hence is a product of America. The connection of this degree with Yorkite Masonry grew gradually. It was probably in part the result of the fact that Thomas Lowndes was an active Yorkite Mason. He was several years High Priest of Jerusalem Chapel number 8 and had attained the rank of Deputy Grand High Priest. The council, which gradually established itself as a functioning institution, for the most part, it kept regular minutes. However, there are occasional gaps, sometimes of more than a couple of months. This is important because as we will discuss later, Jeremy Cross reception of the Royal Master degree is not recorded anywhere, although Columbian Council is the most logical place. In December 1821, a council of Select Masters was absorbed by the Columbian Council, and their first degree of the Select was not until December 23rd, 1821, well after the establishment of many councils of Royal Masters and Select Masters elsewhere. By contrast, the oldest document mentioning the degree we now call Select Master is a certificate dated November the 8th, 1790, wherein Moses Cohen, in his capacity as a Grand Inspector General of the Council of the East and West, certifies that he had conferred several degrees, including the, quote, Select Master of 27, unquote, on Abraham Jacobs. This degree is now known to be essentially the same as our Select Master degree. Thus, it identifies the continental European source of that degree. And has some connection with the rite of perfection, but was not a part of it. And in fact, there is, in 1788, a man named Joseph M. Myers claimed that he deposited in Charleston, South Carolina, a ritual for the Select Master of 27 degree from Berlin. Now, around 1788, a man named Henry Wilmans established a Grand Council who came from Bremen in Germany, who then moved briefly to Charleston and then to Baltimore. In Baltimore, he was the charter master of Concordia Lodge in 1793, rose to be Grand Master of Masons in Maryland in 1794, but unfortunately died the next year at the age of only 44. In 1792, Henry Wilmans established a, quote, Grand Council of Select Masons, unquote. Among those he initiated into this body were 2 eminent Maryland Masons, Philip P. Eckel and his associate Hezekiah Niles. On Wilmans' death, they inherited control of the Grand Council of Select Masons. Now, Philip Eckel was the foremost Mason of his time in Maryland. He received the Lodge degree sometime between 1786 and 1783, when he became a charter member of Concordia Lodge. He was elected Master of the Council on December 4th, 1797, and served for 10 terms. He became the Secretary of the Grand Lodge, Grand High Priest of the Grand Chapter, and General Grand Scribe of the General Grand Chapter. This Council of Select Masons, which Philip Eckel assumed control of with his friend Hezekiah Niles, was not the permanently organized grand body that we normally today assume with that title. Rather, it was an occasional body of select Masons who might be available at the time, called together by the leader whenever there's work to be done. Those who happened to be present constituted the council. The power to confer the degree was vested in the presiding officer, which was Philip Eckel, and those he called to his assistance. This body conferred the degree of Select Master only, as we know from a certificate signed by Eckel himself. Philip P. Eckel did not receive the Royal Master degree until 1819, when it was conferred on by Ebenezer Wordsworth of New York. And thus, by 1814, we have the Royal Master degree being conferred in New York City by the Columbian Grand Council #1 Royal Master Masons, and the Select Master degree being conferred in Baltimore by Philip Eckel and Hezekiah Niles in their Grand Council of Select Masons. Combining these into the cryptic rite was the work of one man, the degree peddler, Jeremy Ladd Cross. Now, Jeremy Ladd Cross was born June 26, 1783 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. He initially worked as a journeyman hatter until his lecturing business reached sane level. He was raised a master mason in St. John's Lodge in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1807. He had the talent of perfection in memorization and oral presentation. This talent was soon recognized. On November 1st, 1813, he received a certificate from the Grand Lecturer of New Hampshire, certifying his qualifications as a lecturer in Masonic ritual. The ritual he taught being a version of the Thomas Smith Webb arrangement of the Prestonian work. On March 15th, 1815, he received the Royal Arch degree in St. Albans, Vermont. Lecturers of this period, like Cross, acquired all of the degrees they could possess and then conferred them freely. Thus, one of the possible ways Cross obtained the Royal Master degree was on August 5th, 1815, when he was in Hopkinton, New Hampshire, visiting the newly organized Tyrian Council of Royal Masters, which had received a degree from Benjamin Gleason, who probably received a degree from Thomas Lowndes in New York City. In May 1816, Jeremy Ladd Cross went to Providence, Rhode Island to, quote from his diary, perfect himself in the chapter work, unquote, under the direction of Thomas Smith Webb. Webb taught several men, including Cross, who set out to teach the work to any brother willing to pay for his instruction. Unlike today, this was an accepted practice in the first half of the 19th century and led, in many cases, to be a principal reason for the spread of Masonry across the country as it expanded westward. After receiving Webb's instruction, Cross went with him to the General Grand Chapter meeting in New York City, where he met Philip Eckel from Baltimore and John Lind from New Haven, Connecticut. He may have received the Royal Master degree at this time from Thomas Lowndes. He also fortified himself with a certificate of proficiency signed by the officers of the General Grand Chapter. He then traveled south, lecturing in New Jersey and Delaware and coming to Baltimore, Maryland. There he received the Select Master degree from Philip Eckel, and with it the authority to communicate it to any group of men, 9 Royal Arch Masons. Setting out for the South and West, he left a trail of visitations and lecturing in Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Mississippi, and Louisiana. By the spring of 1817, he was back in Baltimore, where he was now empowered by Eckel to charter councils of select masters, which he had informally organized, and which he might form thereafter. Returning home for the summer, he established councils at Newcastle, Delaware, Windsor, Vermont, and Bradford, Vermont. Early in the fall, he headed south again. He visited his friends in Hopkinton, New Hampshire, where he established a council of select masters, which he also did in Boston, Mass, before visiting Thomas Webb in Providence, Rhode Island. He next had a business conference with John Lind in New Haven before heading south, establishing councils in New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia. At the Grand Chapter of Connecticut, held in New Haven in October 1817, Deputy Grand High Priest John Hart Lind was authorized to procure a suitable companion to visit and instruct the chapters. While in Virginia, Cross received word of his appointment and news of the death of John Lind by the same mail. He began his return trip to New Haven, where he was to make his home for the next 15 years. During February 1818, Cross commenced lecturing with the chapters about the state. In making his rounds, he established councils of select masters in most of them by conferring the degrees gratis, but taking a fee of $20 for the warrant he left with each group. From Cross's diary, we learned that he organized 11 councils from February 7th, 1818 to February 22nd, 1819. When he first taught both the Royal and Select Master degrees to a new council is not known, except that On March 21st, 1818, he entered in his diary that he conferred both degrees on Companion Stowe in Middletown, Connecticut. Now, an assembly of illustrious companions, members of the 11 councils in Connecticut, was held at New Haven in October of 1818. It was resolved to recommend to the several councils in the state that delegates be appointed to convene at Hartford the following May to take into consideration the expediency of establishing a Grand Council of Select Masons with and for the state of Connecticut, and with powers to form and establish a constitution for the regulation and government of the state, of the same, and of the councils coming under its jurisdiction. Accordingly, 22 illustrious companions, representing all except one of the council, assembled at the Masonic Hall in Hartford, Connecticut on Tuesday, May 18th, 1819. It was, I quote, unanimously resolved that it was expedient to establish a Grand Council of Select Masons in and for the state of Connecticut, and that a Grand Council be hereby established accordingly, unquote. Further voted that a committee of 3 be appointed to draft a constitution and report the adjourning meeting. The committee made their report on May 20th, 1819. Several articles adopted at that time were the usual ones outlining the organization, setting forth the powers of the Grand Council, the duties of the select constituent council, establishing fees, and providing for the issuance of new charters. Of particular interest is the 10th article, granting councils the power to confer the degrees of royal and select masters for the established fee. Thus was established the oldest Grand Council in the world, which was functioning continuously ever since. Now, in conclusion, thus the important dates documenting the combination of the degrees of Royal Master and Select Master into the Cryptic Rite are 2. First, on March 21st, 1818, Jeremy Cross visited Middletown, Connecticut, where he communicated the, quote, 2 degrees of Royal and Select Master, according to his diary. Second, on May 20th, 1819, the original constitution of the Grand Council of Royal and Select Masters of Connecticut granted councils power to confer the degrees of Royal and Select Master for the established fee. That's what I have to say. If anyone would have some questions, I'm perfectly willing to try and answer them.